international coalition in advance has placed almost the entire burden for the security and reconstruction of Iraq on our American soldiers. The lack of a sensible plan to win the peace left us with too few troops to establish security in order after Saddam was toppled, and no clear sense of what needed to be done to rebuild Iraq and what the difficulties in doing that with all of its history coming out of 30 years under a brutal dictator were and was. Those errors resulted in a security vacuum where troops could have made the most difference in providing stability, enabling a small and disorganized insurgency to grow in size and effectiveness, and directly leading to the increased influence of sectarian leaders, as well as the influx of significant numbers of Al-Qaeda-related terrorists across Iraq's unprotected borders. Despite these serious problems and setbacks, we have made some hard-won progress there, helping Iraqis to write a constitution, to hold 3 historic democratic elections, millions coming out in the face of terrorist threats that they should not. We've helped them now form a unity government and build an Iraqi army. But the past 7 months, since the terrorist bombing of the Shia mosque in Samarra, inflamed sectarian tensions have been painfully disappointing. The situation in Iraq today on the ground is not what any of us hoped and believed it would be. Security in too many places there is deteriorating. Particularly in Baghdad, violence goes on every day among Iraqis at a terrible level. That's true in the broader Sunni triangle. While the hours in which electricity is now available to the Iraqi people rose in the last quarter, and the output of the oil industry also grew, life in Iraq is extremely difficult for most Iraqis, and dangerous for them as well. Their optimism is diminishing and their patience is wearing thin. Too many talented Iraqis are leaving. Others are turning to the secular militias to provide the security and the services that the Iraqi army and government is not able to provide as broadly as we had hoped by now. But the fact is, as vexing and painful and difficult as the situation there is today, we don't have the luxury of playing what-if games with the past. As Winston Churchill said during World War II, when some of his own supporters wanted to focus on investigating the actions of his predecessor, Churchill said, "If the present tries to sit in judgment of the past, it will lose the future." If the present tries to sit in judgment of the past, it will lose the future. And that's my feeling. The one question that really matters now is how do we move forward and provide a better future for the Iraqi people and more security for the American people. And in my view, that question is not just about when we get our troops home, but also how we get our troops home and what they leave behind them in Iraq. Ned Lamont has given his answer for Iraq's future. I should say he's given his answers, plural, for Iraq's future, because he has taken more than a half dozen different positions on this one issue, big issue, in his campaign. Today, I'm going to take him at his word when he said that he would push for an immediate withdrawal of frontline troops from Iraq now. That's the position he articulates most often. And I'm going to take him at his word when he has said that he would have supported, if he were in the Senate earlier this year, the Kerry-Feingold resolution, which called for all American troops to be out of Iraq by July 1st, 2007. So that is the Lamont plan, as I understand it, straight from his mouth. 1, begin immediate withdrawal of U.S. troops now. 2, all troops out by July 1st, 2007, 9 months from now, no matter what. Let me repeat that. Begin immediate withdrawal of U.S. troops now, all troops out by July 1, 07, 9 months, no matter what. In a foreign policy speech he made earlier this year, Mr. Lamont tried to fudge his position a bit by starting to call it a timeline. Maybe because the polls show that word is more popular than deadline. But make no mistake, immediate withdrawal and all troops out by July 1st is more than a timeline. It is a deadline. So Ned, let's talk straight with the people of Connecticut. Tell the truth and don't spin it. The truth is that Lamont's plan is not a plan for changing course in Iraq. It is a plan for giving up in Iraq. For giving up on the hopes of the Iraqi people, for becoming free and independent, for giving Iraq up to the terrorists and the sectarian militias, to the Iranians and Syrians who would exploit the resulting chaos, for giving up on the possibility of an American victory in Iraq. Let me explain why his plan is not just a bad idea, but a formula for defeat and disaster. When Ned Lamont talks about immediate withdrawal, he says we should pull back our frontline troops. That itself demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of the war in Iraq. First, there is no front line in Iraq, as there was in the Gulf War, certainly in World War II. Second, if you pull back those combat troops best able to suppress the sectarian violence and target and kill the enemy, then you leave our other troops and personnel much more vulnerable to attack, more vulnerable with each additional troop withdrawal. That's not right. The second point is apparently lost on Ned, who says that while we are withdrawing his troops, and I quote again, we'll be there in a residual backup role when it comes to humanitarian and reconstruction assistance. That's a pretty warm and fuzzy concept, those words, but it is a naive and deadly policy. Any relief workers who are left behind would be sitting ducks for the insurgents and the terrorists who would have a field day killing them off one by one, knowing the U.S. military was no longer nearby to come to the rescue. What happens to Iraq when we immediately start withdrawing our troops and have them out 9 months from today, no matter what's happening on the ground? First, the insurgents and the terrorists will keep drawing blood each and every day, knowing that our power is being diminished with each passing moment. Second, as our forces decrease and the reach of our military is reduced, the Iraqi people will increasingly turn to the Iraqi factional sectarian forces, the very militias that are attempting to bring about a civil war for security. That in turn will increase the size, strength, and influence of those deadly militias and weaken the legitimate government of Iraq and the Iraqi army. A slippery, deadly slope every step of the way. In the meantime, because the Lamont plan would mandate an arbitrary deadline for total withdrawal, all those who are our enemies and the enemies of a unified Iraq, the factional militias, the insurgents, the terrorists, the Syrians, the Iranians, would have our blueprint. A blueprint for disaster for Iraq and for America. They could start planning immediately for July 2nd, 2007, the day all American troops would be gone. And what would their plans be? Peace and security for Iraq? Democracy and freedom for its people? The destruction of Al-Qaeda? Not on your life. The fact is, our enemies will be for much greater death and destruction than we are witnessing today. Their plans will include the overthrow of the elected government in Iraq, a takeover of the economic engine of Iraq, the oil industry, with all the implications that will have for world oil markets and the price of gasoline and home heating, all here at home. Their plans will include the dissolution of civil society in Iraq and any semblance of democracy. We can't predict which interests will prevail, but we know that none of them will be good for us. Consider this awful but very likely outcome. The religious and ethnic factions will establish their own autonomous regions. Al-Qaeda will find more safe havens for its network of terrorists, like they did in Afghanistan before 9/11, from which to attack America and other countries worldwide. The Iranians will surge in to take over large parts of the South. The Syrians will carve out their sphere of influence, and the proliferation of instability and